So this video is helping you to revise the three primary food substances: carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. Now, for carbohydrates, it would be quite short. It will be a summary because we have talked a lot in the class. But for proteins especially, it will be in very great details. Okay, so for each type of food substances that we are going to examine, we gotta study the structure, the functions, what happened when they are in excess, and also the food tests for all these four food substances. All right, so take out your notes and get ready. Pause the video whenever you need to mark down something or write the contents in your notes. Okay, so for carbohydrates, remember that there are the smallest unit, the monosaccharides. Two monosaccharides join into disaccharides. These are all sugars. Food that is rich in sugar include fruits, table sugar, and milk, and etc. Also remember that a large number of monosaccharides can join together to form polysaccharides. And in plants, it's mainly in the form of starch. So therefore, numerous plant foods here, including cereal, bread, potato, corns, etc. These are the plant foods that are rich in starch. To study the structure of carbohydrates, we always have to start from the basic unit. So that is monosaccharide. So here there is a picture of glucose. You don't need to memorize the formula, but by counting the atoms inside, we find that the formula is C6H12O6. Well, this formula would be similar for other monosaccharides, meaning that all the monosaccharides are formed by only carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. For all carbohydrates, the property is that the H2O ratio is 2:1, like water. Well, another property that is, but it's unrelated to their size, is their chemical property. Now, for monosaccharides and disaccharides, they are all reducing sugars, except sucrose. Okay, except sucrose. Well, this is important because these chemical properties allow us to do tests in the lab to test for their presence. So knowing that they are reducing is important for the food test later on. Polysaccharides are not all non-reducing. As mentioned in class, it is important to realize that for carbohydrates, lipids, or proteins, they can all interchange between the smaller units and the larger units. So monosaccharides can combine to form disaccharides or polysaccharides by a reaction called condensation, while a large disaccharide or polysaccharide can be broken down back into their monosaccharides by a process called hydrolysis. This slide is trying to illustrate how the building up and breaking down concept can be applied to our body when we eat food. Let's say we take in food that is rich in starch. So how come the glucose in the starch molecule become available to our body cells? Well, we have discussed this actually in the notes page 4. So I suggest you to pause this video right now. Try to think about how to describe the events happening, and then take up and read page 4 notes and have a check, and then play this video. Okay? So I hope you have paused. So I'm going to start now. The starch is such a big molecule that our body cannot absorb them directly. So our digestive system would break down the starch back into the smallest basic unit, the monosaccharides, that is, in this case, the glucose. So starch is broken down into glucose, and they are now in the small intestine. To enter body cells, they will first be absorbed into blood, and then they are transported by blood to different body cells all around our body. Once the glucose enters these body cells, there are different possible outcomes. Either the cells directly use these glucose by respiration to release energy, or the cell may choose to combine these glucose into polysaccharides, in this case glycogen, for storage. Now this will happen when the glucose is in excess. Moreover, these stored glycogen can be further broken down back into glucose when the cell wants to use it. Now, these are all the concepts discussed in page 4. Make sure you know how to describe these processes. Not only for carbohydrates, we'll apply this concept to lipids and proteins later on. So this would be a very important part. The main function of carbohydrates is to provide energy. For monosaccharides and disaccharides, those that are small, they serve as energy source in a quick way. Especially for glucose, glucose is our primary energy source, meaning that we will choose, when our body has a lot of different types of energy source there, our body would choose to use glucose first. So that's the meaning of the word primary. The large form of polysaccharides, the glycogen, acts as energy storage instead. Now, when the carbohydrates in our diet are in excess, our body would store these carbohydrates in form of glycogen in liver and skeletal muscles, or store in form of fats in adipose tissues. Our short-term storage would be glycogen, but if we have if we have excess carbohydrates for months or years, then they would be stored in fats. All right, next up, lipids. There are two main kinds of lipids. The fats, 脂肪, that we usually talk about is actually called triglyceride. See how to read triglycerides. They are rich in meat, milk, butter, yogurt, cheese. I put all these together because these three are made from milk, right? So we sometimes call these dairy products. 奶類製品啊。For plant food, lipids is rich in nuts, okay? Vegetables don't have a lot of lipids, but nuts have, because they are seeds. The plants store a lot of fats in the seeds so as to provide energy for the seeds to germinate and grow into a new plant again. Another type of lipid is called cholesterol, 膽固醇. Again, you'll find it in similar food sources of animal food, meat, and dairy products, but also specifically in egg yolk, which is really, really rich in cholesterol. Now, one common misunderstanding, now that's not for exam, but The one common misunderstanding about cholesterol is that you may heard of your parents asking you not to eat too much egg yolk in order so that you won't have too much cholesterol, which seems to be bad for your heart. But you don't need to worry about that too much now, unless you eat really too much. The main source of cholesterol in our body is actually our own. We make our own cholesterol in the liver. When you eat, let's say, 3 or 4 egg yolks, more than 2, let's say, there will be more cholesterol intake in our diet, right? So our body would adjust by making less cholesterol on our own so that we can keep our blood to have a suitable amount of cholesterol. Okay, so don't worry about eating too much unless you eat really too much. Okay? Again, we start by studying the chemical structure of lipids. And we'll only focus on our study about triglycerides. Okay, when you look at the chemical formula of lipids or triglycerides, sorry, it's actually made up of 2 smaller basic units, the glycerol and also 3 fatty acids. Read the chemical structure. Now you don't need to remember, but realize that like carbohydrates, triglycerides or fats are only made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. What's different is the ratio about H and O. It's not 2 to 1 anymore. And even in the basic unit of fatty acids, there are much more carbon there. So the fats or triglyceride can be formed by combining the basic units into triglyceride, or our body can actually break them down back into the basic units as well. Now, please pause this video and draw this picture into your notes, page 5. But one thing to remind is that when I draw fatty acids, I usually draw it like this. So how I draw fat would be a glycerol and then 3 fatty acids joined together with this glycerol. So pause and draw into your notes, page 5. Now once again, we are trying to illustrate the building up, breaking down concept in our body. So I show you this page. This page is about carbohydrate, right? But the similar concept applies to to fats as well. So let's see. When you take in food that is rich in fats, your digestive system will break them down back into the basic unit. Instead of glucose, now it's glycerol and fatty acids. So what happened next? Can you think about it? They are now in the small intestine. In order to get into the body cells, they will first be absorbed into blood and then transported by blood to the body cells all around our body. Once they enter the body cells, again, there are different possible outcomes. Fats, like carbohydrates, are energy source, so that's why they can be used by respiration to release energy again. This part would be similar to carbohydrates. Well, when it is in excess, again, the concept is the same. The body cell may combine them back into the large form, that is the fats in this case, and store it in the body cells. Now again, depending on the use, the body cell may make use of this whole fat because the fats have much more functions other than energy. Say for example, the cell may use this fat molecule to build the cell membrane. Or again, the cell may break this down back into fatty acid glycerols and use it for respiration to release energy. Well, this also tells you that fats have much more functions other than providing energy, and this is different from carbohydrates. Carbohydrates can act as energy source, but also acting as having a lot of different other functions, such as acting as shock absorber, heat insulator, a component of cell membrane. These two functions is difficult for you to understand at the moment, so you may only have to memorize it first. Alright, we will learn about this in higher forms. Now, one thing I forget to mention in the previous page is that the same amount of fats can release twice the amount of energy as the same amount of carbohydrates. This is the first thing. The second thing is that fats are not primary energy source, meaning that they won't be used first. Now, if our body cell has carbohydrate, fats, and proteins together, our cell would choose to use carbohydrate first. Only when these carbohydrates start to become nearly used up, then our body will start to use our fats for respiration to release energy. So that is the reason why it takes more work to lose our body weight when we want to get rid of some of the fats in our body. But again, fats are good. Fats are useful. Don't avoid it completely. You need fats. Okay? Now, what if they are in excess? Excess fats will be stored in a special type of tissue called adipose tissue. I've told you, these are the examples. So fluffy, white, yellowish layer around internal organs or under skin. When we zoom into this adipose tissue, you can see those cells are really specialized in a way that they have a very, very large vacuole carrying a lot of lipids inside and pressing the vacuole and all other organelles to the side, so that when you look at this cell like this, the nucleus is somewhat here, being pushed to the side. All the white space that you see here is actually a gigantic vacuole with numerous fats inside. Alright, the last part of this video is about protein. We haven't talked about this in class, so I'll go a little bit slower and in much more details, so pay attention. If you need to rest or if you need to recharge, pause this video, go ahead, wash your face and come back. Alright, this is something completely new. And protein is, to me, is actually quite different from carbohydrates and fats in terms of both structures and functions. So it's very, very different from what we have talked about previously. From the name, you would know that proteins are rich in eggs, but it's mainly in the egg white. Okay? Animal food is the main source of proteins. So meat, because our muscles, meat is actually a piece of muscle, right? And our muscles are actually made up of proteins mainly. Milk and also the dairy products, they are rich in proteins. Well, for plant food, in general, they have much less proteins. Vegetables, fruits, they have much less proteins. But there are special plant foods that are rich in proteins, and they are the beans and the nuts. Again, those are the seeds of the plants that is going to let the plant grow let the seed germinate and grow into a new plant. So they have a lot of food storage in proteins. Again, we start from the basic unit. Proteins, again, is a very, very big molecule made up of small units called amino acids. Now here, I show you the simplest form of amino acid here. Now compare this with glucose, glycerol, fatty acids, the basic units of carbohydrates and lipids. Can you identify the key difference between them? Now, don't care about the numbers. You don't need to focus on the numbers of atoms. How many H there, how many C there. You don't need to. Focus on the type of elements that is present. Can you see the difference? Pause if you can't, alright, if you want more time. So let me show you the answer. The answer is this. You see? The first special feature of proteins is that they all contain nitrogen in addition to carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. This is very special for proteins, so memorize this. Alright, the second feature that is so special about protein is this. Now, I've told you, this is just one example, the simplest example of amino acids. Our human body, for all the proteins, they are actually made up of 20 types of amino acids there. So forget these words, just look at the structure, forget the name as well. I show you the 20 amino acids there. Can you see the similarity and the differences among these amino acids? Again, pause the video and think. Now, what you have to think is, look at this structure. Can you see which part of this picture is common among all the amino acids? And which part in this picture becomes different among different amino acids? So pause and really take a look. And when you have the answer, play it again. So here is my answer. You'll see that all these upper parts are common, are the same among all the different amino acids. The only different part is the lower part here. Now for glycine, that is the simplest amino acid, it has an H. But there are different amino acids with, more complicated and crazy structures like these. When this part differ, they become another amino acid. And in total, there are 20 common types of amino acids important for human. So that's the second feature of proteins and amino acids. Unlike lipids, let's say, there are always glycerol and fatty acids. Unlike carbohydrates, there are different forms, but there are only a few. The basic unit for proteins, that is amino acids, there are 20 different types already. And each type only differ in their side chain. So what I want you to do now is turn to your notes page 7, find a blank space, and draw this structure of amino acids together. So here I'm going to show you how I'm going to draw this. The first thing now you know is that this is no longer H, because that's just only one example, right? So let me show you how I view this general structure. You need to memorize this, okay? I'll first consider the central carbon here. That is the carbon here. And I see that there are 4 structures linked to this carbon. On one side is the side that is so special because it contains amino acids. The nitrogen. So pause and whenever you want. On the right hand side is another special group, the COOH. Then there is always a hydrogen on top, on one side I mean, and there is a side group that may change among different amino acids, and we call this R, the R group. Okay, so let's review this structure. The amino acids is made up of several parts that is common among different types, including this red part called amino group. And the green part here called carboxyl group. This group is actually acidic, and that is why this whole chemical is called amino acid. Amino group, an acidic group called carboxyl group. There is an H on one side, and there is a side chain on the other side, and this is variable. That means different in different amino acids. So to summarize what we have talked about just now, amino acid is special because it's made up of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. Each amino acid consists of an amino group and a carboxyl group that is common among all different types of amino acids. In human, there are 20 common types of amino acids. You have to memorize this number. So how do they differ? The only difference is in the R group, the variable side chain. So in this picture, each circle represents an amino acid. And now you should understand they are in different colors because they are different. There are many different types of amino acids, even though each of them look like a circle, but inside they are slightly different in terms of the R group. So these amino acids can join together to form a long chain, and that is a protein. Similarly, a big protein can be broken down back into its basic unit, the amino acids. Now, one thing that is special in protein is that because there are so many different types of amino acids available, they can be joined in any order, right? So there are many different possible combinations of these different amino acids. It can be red, blue, yellow, green, red, blue, yellow, green, or it can be a blue, red, green, green, blue, red, green, green, or it can be any order when the body joins them up. This means that with the 20 different amino acids available, our body can combine them into different amino acid sequence. and this will form different proteins. These different proteins would have different shape, different property, and different structure. A function, I mean. So this molecule is not mainly used for energy, although it can, because it has so many carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. But the main function of protein in our body, because of these these huge possibilities of different forms, it is good in using it to build our different body parts. Now imagine if there is only one substance that builds up our body, every part of our body would be very similar, would look like a robot. Imagine you only use metal, you only use steel to build a robot. No matter how fancy you build it, it's always hard, it's always shiny. Every part of it is hard, it's shiny, it's silvery, so it's all the same. But you don't look like a robot, right? You have many different body parts, your lips, your eyes, your hairs, your nails, your internal organs. They all look different. They all feel different and function differently because there are so many different types of proteins. You have so many different building raw materials, so you can use something that is tough to build your hair. You can use some proteins that are elastic to build your skin. You can use some proteins that are forceful, that are tough and strong to build your muscles. You can use some proteins that are hard to build your nails. So having so many different proteins possible is what's so amazing about life, not only human, but life in general, because your body parts can be so different by building it up with different proteins. So I hope you feel how amazing this is. Now, again, we are trying to illustrate the building up, breaking down concept to see how the proteins in the food eventually become proteins in you. Again, I start with this slide because the concept is very similar. The proteins in the food is usually very big, and large molecules can't be absorbed directly. So they will be first broken down by our digestive system into the smaller amino acids. Now these basic units are small enough so that they can be absorbed into blood and then transported by blood to different body cells. So every body cell needs these amino acids to build the protein, to build their cells and parts. However, the story downstream would be quite different. Instead of using it to release energy, which it can, but it's the only exception, all right, in very extreme case, for most and nearly all the time, these amino acids are not broken down by respiration. Instead, the body cells will combine these amino acids into the protein that it wants. So that's the concept, all right? Glucose, lipids, or fats, once they enter the cells, quite likely they're broken down by respiration to release energy. Fats have a lot of different other functions, that's true, but releasing energy is one of their main functions. Now, protein is very different. The key function of amino acids and proteins is not to release energy, but instead the cells are going to join these amino acids into different proteins to build body parts. So by chance, it can build into the same protein as this one. But think about it. You're not a cow, right? So the protein in the milk, you don't want a protein in the cow. You want a protein in human, right? But don't worry, you don't need to eat a human to do that, because these amino acids, remember, it's possible to be joined in different ways, in different sequence to be exact. So that's why most of the time our body won't join these amino acids back to the original form. But the body cell would join these amino acids into different sequences according to its need. So even if we take in a cow protein in the milk, we can still build a human protein because the amino acids that the living things use are the same types. We just join them in different ways. And the body cell can choose to join them in the sequence that they want to form different proteins. These different proteins, again, have different shape, different functions. So that's the idea how protein is being used in our body. And I hope you can pause this. Now, what you need to do, because you need to submit this to me via WhatsApp, okay? So pause this video, take out a single line paper, a full single line paper, okay? You're going to answer several questions during this video. And this is the first 2 questions that I have for you. Answer yes or no. And I hope you can explain a little bit if possible. You know, in the exam, you have to. So why not try it now? Write down your answer in the single line paper. Later on at the end, I'll tell you how to submit it, and I'll share with you the answer. If you don't do it, you won't get the answer. Okay? So you pause the video. I won't leave time in the video. You pause the video. So let's match with the diagram in the notes how proteins can be broken down or built up. Okay? The building block here, I use rectangle in the notes instead of circles. So these are amino acids. They are the smallest form. They can be joined together by condensation into long chains, at least hundreds, I would say. And eventually they become a protein. But there are different terms for used in this process. Okay, so let me introduce to you. The final product is a protein, which is a well-folded form. Actually, these amino acids would first join into a short chain first. Around, they'll join one by one. So there are around structures that looks like 50 amino acids or below. Structures like this, we call it peptide. So a peptide is a short chain of amino acids, usually less than 50. But you can imagine your cell would continue to join it up into a much longer string-like structure, linear structure. So we call this a polypeptide. So a polypeptide is a much longer chain of amino acids. Well, you can say polypeptide is actually a protein. But if you are being exact, then we usually say that the polypeptide would then fold into a particular shape and become a protein. 好啦，咁你可能聽完就好驚，喂，咁我以後考試答咩字啊？我嘅建議就係 basically 你得呢兩個字用嘅啫，你可以咁簡單嘅，總之 unit 就係 amino acid， 一 join 埋就叫 protein， 可以咁簡單嘅。但係你要認得呢兩個字，你可以自己寫文嘅時候唔用，你可以自己答案嘅時候唔用呢兩個字，但係你要認得呢兩個字其實係同 protein 有關。OK？ Now with all these understandings, I hope you now have a good idea about the function of proteins. Because there are 20 different types of amino acids, and you can join them into different sequence. So it can form into different types of proteins, which have different shapes and different functions. And this is important because it can then be used to build different parts of our cells and our body. I'll show you some examples in the next page, which I cannot shift to now. So the function of protein is actually huge. Every different body parts have different proteins for different functions. 就正因為咁多 function， 所以講唔到，我哋就一句講晒佢。總之 proteins are used for growth and repair. It's for growth. It makes sense, right? Because when you grow, you become bigger. 咁你大嚿咗嗰啲物料喺邊度嚟嘅咧？ So those new body parts are made up of proteins. Okay? All those new cells, all those new body parts, they are made up of proteins, so they are for growth. So how can we say they are for repair then? Because let's say your skin is damaged, you need to heal it up, you need to make some new skins, right? So again, it's about making. Repair is just the same, making something, but instead of making something new to make you bigger, repair means making some body structures that replace the damaged ones or replace the old ones. So growth and repair is very similar in concept, building body parts. Well, after knowing all these, there is one important sign up there. It's about essential amino acids and non-essential amino acids. Now, what does it mean? In Chinese, essential means 必須 non-essential means 非必須。咁你初時就諗啦，係咪即係話20隻裡面有啲我哋要，有啲我哋唔要咧？嗱，唔係咁嘅意思啊，非必須唔係話我哋唔用佢。呢個必須同非必須咧，係以 diet 為標準。必須嘅意思係我哋必須要從 diet 去攞。非必須係意思即係話我哋唔一定要從 diet 去攞翻嚟。我再講一次啊，20隻 amino acid， 我哋嚟緊會話有9同11嚇，有啲係 essential， 有啲係 non-essential。嗱，講一次，講清楚啊！20隻 amino acid， 我哋身體要用幾多隻啊？答案係20隻都要用，唔使問。但係點解有啲叫 essential， 有啲叫 non-essential 啊？ Some of these 20 amino acids, they can be made by ourselves. And be made by our body. So imagine if our diet don't have these amino acids, it's fine, right? Because we can make them. We call these non-essential amino acids. It's just that they are non-essential from the diet. they are super important for our body again. The other 9 amino acids, they can't be made by our body. If they can't be made, then the only source of it must be from the diet. So that's why they are called essential amino acids. We must have them from the diet because we can't make them. So pause this video and answer questions 3A and 3B in your single line paper. Now this slide is trying to show you how different types of proteins have different shapes, different functions, and build up different body parts. So let me write down the big concept here first. The big concept in this slide is that our body has a lot of different proteins, and they have different shapes and functions and properties. And our body is so amazing because we can choose to use the suitable types of proteins to build the suitable body parts. Or even the cell part. Now, so let's start with cell level. This is the cell membrane. You can see there are a lot of different shapes of proteins inserted across the across the membrane, and they serve different functions. So say for example, this pore-like protein is trying to allow cell to absorb something, right? So that the substance can pass through. So you see, the shape of the protein is so important for its function. It has to look like that with a pore inside so that things can go in. Another example is this one. So you can see this protein crosses both sides of the membrane. So some chemicals can come and combine with this protein. And this protein will then give a signal to the cell to do something. We call this a receptor protein, but we call this a transporting protein, a transport protein. This is a receptor, but again, or communication protein. Now, never mind the name. The key is not these names. The key is the concept that different proteins with different shape have different functions. So that's picture number 1. Then we try to look at body parts, a bigger picture, okay? Some proteins are very elastic. They are used to build up these parts, these middle parts of the skin. These elastic proteins fill it up so that your skin is a little bit elastic. You can pull your skin, right? Pull your face, right? You can. And when you stop, the skin can return to its shape. 你唔會有人掹完塊皮膚掹完定咗型係嘛？有啲病人就有啦，我話俾你聽，有啲病人咧，好似個皮膚如果身體整唔到呢種 elastic 嘅 protein 咧，佢哋嗰啲皮膚係真係掹完就好似泥膠咁 break 咗喺度㗎。OK， 但係唔係種種 protein 都 elastic 嘅。如果你將啲 amino acid join in another sequence, they can form proteins that are very tough. And those toughness formed a protein here. 呢一條條藍色白色呢啲絲就係啦 ，called keratin 角質層啊。So they form your hair. So your hair is not that elastic, right? 冇人可以拉到橡筋咁拉你條頭髮㗎嘛，係嘛？ But it's tough, right? So it's not breaking easily. The same protein, make it tougher, it makes up your nail. 你嘅指甲係全 protein 嚟嘅 ，OK， 係嘛？幾唔同 Well, there can be another type of protein that is long, tough, and powerful. So they can make up your muscles. So when I zoom into the muscle, you cut it like this, and if you zoom in, each fiber here is a protein molecule. 所以你切牛扒，你有時你聖誕節係咪？你切完塊牛扒，你睇下個切面一粒粒㗎嘛，係嘛？佢本來就係一條條長嘅絲 ，which is made up of proteins， 好長好長嘅 protein，and they are powerful. They can generate force to help you push and pull。OK， 所以調轉咯，你食啲動物嘅 meat 咪會食咗好多 protein 翻嚟嘅，因為 muscle 80%以上都係 protein 嚟嘅。最後少少花邊嘢咧，回應翻我哋嘅 essential 同 non-essential amino acids。我哋話頭先我哋話，其實你諗真啲 ，protein 嘅 food source 咧，主要係來自 animal food 嘅。But don't forget plant food can also provide you with proteins. So is there any difference? Because this is important to vegetarian, right? Now I've told you there are less type of plant food that is rich in protein. That's point number one. Point number two is that even for those food that is rich, those plant food that is rich in protein, they usually lack one or more essential amino acids, those that we can't make. While animal food usually provides all essential amino acids. So we usually say animal food is a complete protein source, but with plant food is an incomplete protein source. So is this a problem for you? Now, if you eat both animal food and plant food, now that's not a problem. But if you are vegetarian, you only intake plant food, and especially if you are very straight vegetarian, you know there are a lot of different types, right? There are some vegetarians that, okay, I can drink milk, I can eat eggs, while there are some strict vegetarians that I can't drink milk, can't eat eggs, can't eat seafood, blah, blah, blah. So what about them then? How can they avoid lacking essential amino acids? Can you guess? The answer is by having a wide variety of plant foods, many different types. Now, yes, it's true, each type of plant food will lack one or more essential amino acids, but the idea is that different plant foods miss different ones. So if you can intake a wide spectrum, a wide range of different types, you can different plant foods can compensate each other, and eventually the whole profile, the whole diet can give you a complete source of proteins. Now, say that again, each plant food may miss one or more types of essential amino acids, but if you eat many different types, the diet as a whole can provide all the essential amino acids. All right, coming to the last part. When we have excess proteins, how our body handles them is very, very different from the way we handle glucose or lipids, because for those, we store them. But for proteins, we cannot store. Now, you can have a bit idea because we don't want too much acids in our blood, in our body. And these are amino acids, remember. So our body can't store them. 唔係唔想 store，係直情唔 store 得啊。So the only way is to throw them away. But again, throwing them intact, 原個 amino acid removed from our body is wasteful. We can't have the end because whenever there is an nitrogen, it has to be amino acid, right? So our body's strategy is to break this amino acid down, get rid or remove the N while keeping the CHO. Because those are good elements, we can restructure them back into glucose and carbohydrates and keep them. So that's why the big idea is like this. Now, without going into details first, the big idea is like this. When we have excess proteins, we can't keep it. It will be converted back into amino acids first. But again, we can't keep or store these excess amino acids. So the idea is to remove them. But we break the amino acids so that we can keep some parts while removing some part. All right, so that's the idea. So excess in proteins or amino acids cannot be stored. If those are proteins, they would first convert into amino acids. Once the amino acids are in excess, they are broken down in the liver. So every body different parts, when they have excess amino acids, they will put it into blood, send it into the liver, and break it down in a process called deamination. Now the name is meaningful. De means delete. The word amine comes from the word amino. The process is called deamination because our goal is to remove this amino group, cut it away, while keeping this part that is rich in carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. We call this the carbon-containing part. The amino group would be converted into something called urea. And this is the chemical that is present in your urine. It's because the liver makes it. All right, break the amino acids, turn this amino group into urea, put it into urine for excretion in kidney. All right. While this part that is the carbon-containing part that is full in CHO, the liver restructure it into carbohydrates or fats because they are only made up of CHO, right? So what's their use then? Now they can either be used for respiration to release energy, or they can be stored depending on the situation. Okay? So that's all for the teaching part. I hope this video helps you to understand a lot of big concepts. 但係請你記住下，背你唔好以為自己識咗啲大道理就代表你考到試。你要記好多細微嘅 detail， 例如頭先 deamination 嗰個故事，你記得哦，拆一半唔拆一半，你咁樣考唔到試啊！嗰幾句説話你基本上係背硬㗎啦，即係你係要裡面每一樣 detail 都要好細緻。頭先我哋裡面講好多故事，你嘅説話要講得好細緻，要寫到出嚟。OK， 咁所以我呢個 big table 嘅 summary 咧係 big concept 嘅啫。例如你見我呢個 summary 裏面呢度我寫 store 一個字，但係到底 store as 乜嘢 ？store in what form？ store in which place？ 呢啲你一定要記。但係有咗個 big picture 你就好記啲。所以請你喺 pause 呢個 video 喺張單行紙度，而家自己默一次。 啲 big concept 先嗱，睇完 video 你淨係得 big concept 嘅啫，唔緊要，但係都請你試下好唔好啊？咁當然你話唔想啊，我想翻去再溫熟啲先做，咁你咪做多次咯。但係希望你而家已經嘗試寫少少答案，逼自己練下好唔好啊 ？OK。咁然之後有啲 common concept 嗱，呢3種 food substance 大家共通點咧就係大家都好大，而且 made up of 一啲 small basic unit。嗰啲 small basic unit 可以 rejoin to large ones， 嗰啲 large molecules 可以 broken down into small ones。咁呢個就係大變細，細變大，呢個道理就共通嘅。但係每一隻 food substance 有佢自己獨特要讀嘅嘢，例如 carbohydrates。佢嗰啲大 mono 啊、大啊、polysaccharide 嗰啲詞語同 function 咧，要獨立讀嘅，就同其他 food substance 冇共通嘅。另外 reducing versus non-reducing 呢個特色都係要獨立記嘅。好啦 ，lipids 咧其實有啲嘢讀嘅，例如脂肪咧會分飽和脂肪 saturated fats 同埋非飽和脂肪 unsaturated fats。There is a page of notes specific for that. You can read that. Now, in the exam, you don't need to memorize those details. 嗰版係額外嘅，你立下有少少感受就得㗎啦。And then lipids 唔係淨係 for energy 嘅，有好多其他 function， 咁就要獨立記啦。Protein 就同其他嗰兩隻嘢好唔同嘅，所以佢就有特別多嘢獨特要記啦。OK， 好啦，最後一 part 咧就係 food test。food test 咧，第一你睇 video，你要揸住 notes page 12、13考㗎。咁另外就睇 perusal 裡面 video， 我會擺上去㗎啦。咁記得睇喎，睇完之後要背喎，背呢度嘅內容要填同埋背。咁你驚錯嘅，咁你就用鉛筆填咗俾我先，我會寫個答案俾大家。咁只要你喺 revision 期間，嗱你可以呢個聖誕假裏面 revise 啦，你可以喺當然你最好而家已經溫一溫啦。咁如果唔得嘅，你嚟緊個禮拜即係考試第一個星期之後嘅禮拜6日抽一日嚟溫嘅話，咁你就最好做掂呢啲嘢，跟住 send 俾我，我收齊 personal WhatsApp send 俾我收齊，我 send 個答案俾你。OK。咁然之後咧，另外我哋星期5都會 stay together。OK， 請你考完試去一去飽咧，ice lab，咁我哋就會同你真實做翻個 food test 一次，咁做1個鐘啦。咁然之後你喜歡嘅就留低溫書1個鐘。咁我就唔係教過晒所有嘢嘅，我就有啲 exercise 俾你現成做。咁但係我就會同你一齊去做嘅時候咧，你會好過一啲。咁但係我切聲明啊，呢個 session 我覺得上次喺實驗室太騷擾啦，唔係話你唔認真，但係個別同學騷擾性太大，令到大家學唔到嘢。我會停㗎啦。如果唔得嘅，走㗎啦。我當然我可以個別叫嗰位同學走，又或者成班停，咁就冇辦法啦。OK， 我又教足你嗰個 video 嗰啲嘢係嘛？咁希望大家自己守規矩啊。OK。